Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of the most complex, long-running conflicts in modern history. But we're going to start in a surprising place. Not with war, but with a moment. Back in 1993, when a lasting peace felt closer than ever. So here's the big question that hangs over everything. In 1993, leaders from both sides actually sat down and signed a historic peace deal. It was this incredible moment of hope. But that hope just shattered. To really get why that deal fell apart and how that failure leads directly to the headlines we're all seeing today, we've got to rewind the clock. So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll look at the early search for a homeland, the birth of a new nation, the wars that completely redrew the map, that one fleeting moment of peace, and then finally the fractured reality of today. Okay, let's go all the way back to the late 1800s. Our story really begins with a people who were desperately searching for a safe place to call home after just centuries of persecution in Europe. For centuries, Jewish people all across Europe faced just horrific persecution. During the Crusades, they were massacred. By the 1800s, this hatred sort of morphed from being about religion into a modern ethnic-based anti-Semitism. All of this pain, it gave rise to this powerful new idea that maybe the only way to be safe, to finally live in peace, was to have a country of their own. And that idea, it got a name: Zionism. It became this political movement with one clear goal: to establish a national homeland. And the place they focused on was Palestine, which they saw as their ancient biblical homeland. This idea really spurred waves of Jewish migration into the region. Now, you have to picture what Palestine was like back then. It was a pretty sparsely populated part of the massive Ottoman Empire. And this is really crucial. For the most part, the local Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities there actually lived together pretty peacefully. But then World War I happened. And that event would completely shatter the Ottoman Empire and redraw the entire map of the Middle East forever. So during the war, Britain got into the business of making promises. A lot of conflicting promises. They told Arab leaders they'd back a huge, unified Arab nation. At the same time, they were promising Zionist leaders a Jewish homeland in Palestine. But the reality? Secretly, they'd already made a deal with France to just carve up the region for themselves. So when the dust settled, it was Britain that ended up in control of Palestine. With Hitler's rise in Germany, Jewish immigration to Palestine absolutely surged, which, as you can imagine, ramped up tensions between Arabs and Jews. Britain was just overwhelmed. So in 1947, they basically tossed the problem to the brand new United Nations. And the UN's solution was, it was dramatic. Just split the land in two. But here's the thing about plans. They don't always become reality. Jewish leaders, they accepted the proposal and in 1948 declared the State of Israel. But the surrounding Arab nations saw this as just another form of European colonialism. They rejected it completely and immediately declared war. And the outcome of that war, it defined this conflict for decades. The brand new State of Israel, totally against the odds, won. Not only did it survive, it actually expanded its territory way beyond the UN's proposed borders. And that planned Palestinian state, it never happened. Instead, Jordan took the West Bank, Egypt took the Gaza Strip, and over 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, an event they call the Nakba, or the catastrophe. But the 1948 war wasn't the end of the fighting, not by a long shot. Just 2 decades later, another war would redraw the map all over again, with consequences that we are still feeling right now. In a shocking military victory that took just 6 days, Israel defeated its neighbors again. It captured huge swaths of land, but most importantly, it seized the last 2 remaining Palestinian territories, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And this, right here, marked the beginning of a military occupation that, in many ways, is still going on today. So now you have Palestinians living under Israeli military rule, with no country of their own. As you'd expect, Palestinian nationalism surged. An organization called the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, became really prominent. At first, they were all about armed struggle. And yeah, they were considered a terrorist group by Israel and the US, but eventually the UN recognized the PLO as the official representative of the Palestinian people. It was during this period of occupation that something new started happening. Israeli citizens, often with government support, began building whole communities, settlements, inside the occupied West Bank. Now, most of the world says these are illegal under international law, but for Palestinians, it was much simpler.
It looked like the slow takeover of the very land they were hoping would one day become their country.
So all this conflict, all this colonization, it sets the stage for a really shocking turn of events in the early 90s. And this brings us right back to where we started. A surprising breakthrough that brought a real, genuine glimmer of hope.
And then, in a move that was honestly historic, old enemies did the unthinkable. The Israeli Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, and the PLO chairman, Yasser Arafat, they officially recognized each other. Secret talks led to the 1993 Oslo Accords, a whole framework for peace that created something called the Palestinian Authority, a body that was meant to give Palestinians some self-governance for the very first time. But on the ground, self-governance turned out to be incredibly complicated. The West Bank was carved up into 3 different zones. Palestinians only had full control in Area A, basically the major cities. The biggest chunk, Area C, that's about 60% of the land, it stayed under full Israeli military control. So the result wasn't really a state, it was more like a fragmented patchwork of isolated Palestinian areas.
But this compromise, it was seen as a complete betrayal by extremists on both sides. For some Israelis, the very idea of giving away any part of what they considered their biblical land was just unthinkable. And this rage all led up to 1995, when a Jewish extremist assassinated Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, hoping to kill the peace process right along with him.
At the exact same time, on the Palestinian side, a new militant group called Hamas was emerging, and they rejected the PLO's whole approach. They saw any compromise with Israel as a total surrender and were committed to its complete destruction. To blow up the peace accords, Hamas launched this horrific campaign of suicide bombings against Israeli civilians. So, you see what happened: the assassination of the Israeli prime minister on one side, and this wave of Hamas bombings on the other. It just completely shattered the trust that you need for peace. It pushed both sides toward extremism and led directly to the deeply fractured present we see today. With the peace process totally dead, a new, much more violent uprising erupted. In response, Israel started building this massive separation barrier around the West Bank. And then came a political earthquake. In 2006, the militant group Hamas actually won the Palestinian elections. And that stunning victory led directly to a short, brutal civil war between Hamas and the PLO. And the result of that civil war was a Palestine that was literally split in two. You had the internationally recognized PLO left governing in the West Bank. But in the Gaza Strip, Hamas seized total control, ruling it as a militant territory and launching rocket attacks into Israel. You ended up with two separate, opposing Palestinian governments. And that, really, is the incredibly complex reality of today. You have a West Bank that's carved up by settlements and checkpoints, and an isolated Gaza ruled by a militant group. Decades of conflict, of occupation, of failed peace talks, they've created a situation that is so deeply fragmented that the main question remains just painfully unanswered. From here, what is the solution?